Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is one Sean Alexander, and he wrote the book, actually a series of books, Sober on a Drunk Planet. Sean, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you?
Very good, thank you. And yeah, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was excited. We were just talking. This is the first time we actually met in person, just had a little bit of a back and forth on Instagram. Yeah, definitely resonate with your content. We'll have it in the show notes. It's basically all lowercase, Sober on a Drunk Planet. That's the handle for Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, let's get into just what you have going on these days. I want to hear, it's like we mentioned, it's a series of books. I want to know, did it start off that way? Your first book came out April 11th of 2022, which was the Sober on a Drunk Planet. There was a follow-up book, which came out late 2022, December, I believe you said, which is Sober on a Drunk Planet, 3 Sober Steps. So yeah, just a little bit about what you have going on with these books.
Yeah, it's funny, like sobriety just keeps giving me loads of interesting and crazy things that I end up doing. So we'll get into the backstory later, but essentially I ended up in rehab for drink and drugs, and I guess to quite a catastrophic extent as well, gambling, but that wasn't what I was trying to fix when I was there. But I always had this thing when I came out, I listened to loads of Audible books. So I'm very much an auditory learner. I love sticking on an Audible, listening. And I needed a lot of inspiring at the time. So I listened to thousands of hours of spiritual books, mental health, physical health, emotional health, loads of biographies. And that for me was a change of mindset, I think, from where I was in my past. And I just thought audibles are a very powerful tool for someone who's coming out the other side. When I went to rehab, it was very much AA. It was a step-based rehab program. For 28 days, I was locked in a psychiatric ward. And we had to go to meetings every night. But beyond just the spiritual emptiness and AA, there wasn't anything there. There was no gut health and nutrition. There wasn't any physical exercise or anything outside of AA, which I thought was a bit strange. But I went to AA, and there's definitely things within AA that are very powerful. But cut a long story short, 5 years sober, then decided I'd retrained as a counsellor, so I was helping people overcome drug addiction, anxiety, depression as well, because I've been through them. So I always thought if there's something that I've personally been through, then it makes it a bit more credible when you're talking to someone. Because equally, I've had bad counselling in the past where the person hadn't been through drug addiction. They didn't know the obsession of the mind and all the car crash stuff that goes with it. So I never really bought into counselling until I had an addictions counsellor at rehab who was 12 years sober, and it just clicked. A good counsellor doesn't necessarily do anything other than ask the right questions, because the power of change, which I found out myself, wasn't from people telling me what to do, because I'm stubborn. I still am stubborn. I won't listen to anybody. I'd rather do it wrong and find out the hard way, than take people's opinions. But that's ultimately what got me into rehab, is because I could never ask for help. But having a good counsellor then was life-changing. So for me to go on that journey, and then 4 years into sobriety, I just took a chance on a YouTube advert for this publishing program. And in 2 months, I'd gone from never writing a book to publishing the first Sober on a Drunk Planet book, which has been on and off bestseller on Amazon, above Alcoholics Anonymous and This Naked Mind.
Wow.
When it was first out. And I just thought, how crazy is that? Like, I literally have no idea what I'm doing in terms of publishing.
Yeah.
I've had failed businesses in the past, and I've always learned a lot from them. So I think quite a lot of the technical side, especially with Amazon and advertising, etc., was sort of something I enjoyed doing, which helps, because a lot of publishing is marketing at the end of the day. There's probably a ton of good books out there, but the people just haven't known how to properly market. So yeah, it's strange how things happen. I retrained as a counsellor and then retrained as a strength and conditioning coach as well. So I was very much of the mind and body aspects of it, especially with nutrition as well. And yeah, it was just, I guess my approach to recovery is it's a cliche term, but holistic. It is
Yeah.
very much, balance is something I've always struggled with. And I still do, even in sobriety, there's things like I overwork. I love what I do, and it's taken me 36 years to finally find something that gives me purpose and passion in the mornings. But I still need to get a balance of needing to go to the gym, doing the exercise rather than sitting at the desk all day and doing that. So, yeah, I released Sober on a Drunk Planet, Giving Up Alcohol last April. That's done really well enough now that I do publishing full time. So Sober on a Drunk Planet isn't just that book series, it's also a publishing platform for other publishers as well. So I've actually published she's anonymous because she's in a weird biscuits and terrible coffee club. So she keeps herself anonymous, but Sienna Green, and I'm launching her book next week. So again, that looks at a different voice, at a slightly different market within the sobriety sphere. And that's the thing. It was never, I never wrote the books to be about me or about my journey. They are reflection books that try to empower people through them questioning themselves as they read along. Personally, my pet hate is reading a self-help book, which is basically a memoir of someone who got too drunk, did too many drugs, and then they're telling you how good their life is and how to live it. That just pisses me off, to be honest. So yeah, it's crazy. Like I've got 3 books out already. I've got gut health and nutrition book, which I'm working with Lindsay at Recovery Nutrition, who's 8 years sober, and she got sober through her nutritional studies, and then subsequently she now helps people in sobriety recalibrate all their gut health, microbiome, etc., because that is such an understated part of recovery. People will give up booze, but then they'll substitute it for food. Food addiction is quite common because people just think, you know what, I need food to survive, and it's not as bad as alcohol. But when your gut is directly communicating with your brain and is in control of your mood, then it's something, especially for me, like I've got genetically, I've got markers for depressive. I'm more prone to depression than most people. So I need to really take control of my gut health to make sure that you don't spiral. And then life stresses as well. Gut health is a great way to sort of combat those stresses. And the book that comes out on May the 8th is, I love it already. I've only written half of it so far, but I geek out on all the new science and all the new medications that they're coming out with to help depression, which go against everything people have known for all these times as well. So it's just, yeah, I just love what I do. I love writing books. And yeah, so far they've been helping people. Got a Facebook community as well. And it's just really inspiring to see people essentially giving up one thing, alcohol, and how crazy the weight loss, the bank balances, getting new jobs, people leaving corporate careers and having the confidence to start their own businesses, the relationships that improve. Sometimes I've had a few people message and say that they've split up with their wives because they've read the book, and it was that powerful for them that they could see that actually when you took alcohol out of the equation, relationships potentially don't have anything in common. And that's, yeah, all from the power of writing a book about how I sort of saw society, and that's why it was Sober on a Drunk Planet, because that's very much how I felt after I got sober.
Yeah, that's great. There's a lot. I was jotting some stuff down. I want to circle back to you. So was that one of your reflections that you had after you'd started sobering up? Were you still in a, social group where everybody was very much drinking? Like, what was it that was your perception of being on a drunk planet? Like, is it, I guess, where are you calling out of right now? As far as like, is it a big drinking culture in the city that you live in?
Yeah, so I'm British. I live in London,
Ah, okay.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
used to work. I used to work in finance as well, so it's very stereotypical.
Mm.
It's not necessarily working in finance that led to the drug addiction. It was a combination of um, drugs are everywhere around here. I'm not sure what it's like where you are, but getting a packet of cocaine is as easy as
Mhm.
getting a pint of
Oh,
beer.
wow. Okay.
Like you've got 2 or 3 dealers in every pub. I had about 6 or 7 numbers in my phone. And once you get hooked, it's dangerous. It used to be 2 or 3 pints, have a gram of coke once a month. Then it was twice a month. Then it was once every week. Then it was twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. And then by the end of it, your whole life's ruined. Your dealer's posting it through the letterbox every morning,
Mm.
just so you can carry on the cycle. And it's crazy looking back at it because my life's so different now to what it was. But there's still reminders out there. Like my what you're saying about friendship groups, I had to move out of a friendship group, not because
Ah.
they're bad people,
Mhm.
but it's really difficult. Like I was 33, 34 at the time, and I had to make the decision to sort of start again. Like I've got a golf club, and the golf club's been brilliant in my recovery because I've had people there that I've known for years. There's a few sober people there as well, so that was my go-to safe place. So it wasn't like I was completely alone, but it was difficult transitioning out of people that you thought you knew, and then you take alcohol out of the way and the drugs, um, and it sort of just all disappears quite rapidly.
Hmm.
It's quite strange.
Yeah, absolutely. What were some of your favorite audiobooks that you had coming out? So somebody that's perhaps sober curious or just getting into the first stages of recovery or sobriety. What were some of the books as far as like mindset and such that you'd recommend to people? I'm a big Audible guy as well, so I'm curious from that sense as well.
So I still listen to it most nights. I sort of interchange between his 2 books, but you've got Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And for me, at the time of coming out of rehab, I took drugs and drank because my mind was so fast. It still is to an extent. Um, but I needed something to sort of to help manage those, yeah, that washing machine sort of thought process. And it was the power of now, was really powerful. It's a very simple concept, and some of the wording he uses in it when you've been doing drugs for the best part of 20 years is a bit hard to grasp at the beginning, but his voice doubles up for like a sleep hypnosis tape as well. So
100%. Yeah.
I've always used it just before bed because it does
Yeah.
both things. It teaches me to stay present, and a lot of work was needed on my ego as well. So A
Mm.
New Earth was brilliant at talking about the ego in depth and sort of get an understanding of that. I got to where I got. I lost everything, money, house. Yeah, it was a proper car crash for someone that was apparently doing well. And on paper, it looked like I had everything. And that was partly part of addiction is building a big ego, not asking for help, thinking you can do it all. And then, yeah, you lose everything and that ego suddenly disappears because you've got nothing, literally nothing to
Yeah.
attach yourself to. And it was just reassuring, the book, because he was also a recovered alcoholic. He was homeless for the best part of 3 years or something.
Mm. Mhm.
So he's really inspiring just in how clear he speaks about these quite complex topics.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right though. He's got that voice that's sort of like this, really like yeah, so
Yeah.
comforting. Yeah, I love those books too. Really great recommendations. I'm noticing you mentioned that you're not necessarily like a memoirs guy, so I'm somewhat reluctant to go back into time and be like, well, let's hear your memoirs essentially, right? So what are some of your reflections, I guess? Because yeah, you've been dropping some hints as far as what has happened to you in your past and what's led you up to what you're doing now. What was your big I'll start with this. What was your big aha moment where you're like, okay, it's time to change what's going on here? Was there a moment where there was like that moment of clarity, or was it just an accumulation of everything? And finally one day you're just like, fuck it, I got to change.
Yeah, I think it is an accumulation of things. I sold a house in London to pay off a drug dealer. So I got into quite bad debts with a drug dealer who could see that I was selling my house. I had to sell my nice Audi car as well to sort of bridge the gap between the house getting sold, because it just, things never pan out how you want them to when you're really out of luck. And my house took a year to sell because I don't know, we'll go into the details of it, but Brexit just started for us British people, which was a nightmare. And it just impacted the housing market. So I had a drug dealer who was just constantly chasing me and threatening to kill me, etc. So I got the house sold as quickly as I could. And then luckily I paid off all my debts to the banks for gambling debts that I had as well, because I was up late with cocaine every night, and then boredom hits in. I had a lot of residual income at the time, but then I started taking out loans, etc. And it was just the case I was hitting every fuck it button by the end. But I managed to get over to South Africa. I lived in Sydney for a while, spending a load of money, really bad, poor mental health. I went over there thinking it would fix me, but I went over there, just made myself more lonely, more depressed. And then moved to South Africa, thought that might fix me. Strangely enough, same thing happens. And then I had to run away from where I was staying. I've been there for 2.5 months. And then I was told on the sly that there were a group of people planning to kidnap me. Because to be honest, I was in a Cape Town, and there are townships nearby, and I was mixing in the pub because that's where I could get my drugs. And I was essentially this rich white English guy that was getting drunk in a pub every night. Didn't work. And to be honest, looking back at it, it's stupid, because there are parts there that are very poor. And that sort of thing happens. I mean, I wasn't helping myself. Right. But then I got wind of that, and that was a bit of a wake-up call. But I was standing on a golf course in Mossel Bay called Pinnacle Point, and it's probably the nicest golf course in the world. I mean, in terms of having a realization that I've been through a lot of chaos, and my money was running out rapidly because I've just been wasting it on drinking drugs in Australia beforehand and living in penthouses and posh hotels, etc., which sounds glamorous, but it really, really wasn't. And then, I was on the third hole. I remember seeing a tortoise. All the holes were overlooking the ocean, nice sunny day. And I just thought to myself, I'm fucked. I really need to get home and sort my life out, because I'm always wanting drugs. It's got me to this point. I feel depressed. And that was it. I think that was, but it took another 9 months before I then ended up in rehab. I then went back into finance, doing a job that I said I'd never go back to. And then the pressures of the corporate world kicked in. And it's stress. Stress kicks off that need to numb your senses a bit. And that cycle just happened again. Right. I think I managed to be clean for about a month, which was the longest ever, and then went back into it, went back into debt, went bankrupt. And the ironic thing is I went bankrupt at the beginning of January, and I was earning an investment consultant's wage, but I'd spent all my money, spent all the wages in the first week. And I was in a situation where I couldn't afford to go to work, which, looking back at it, is bizarre. I couldn't afford to pay rent, so I was kicked out of there. And that's sort of what pushed me into going into rehab, because I knew I had a private medical policy that had a 28-day stay. So I guess I was being a bit savvy, but actually it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Plus, I wasn't homeless in the end, which was the fear that I was on the verge of getting kicked out because I couldn't afford the rent. And then I just wanted to avoid having that awkward conversation with, why aren't you coming into work?
Yeah, sure. How hard was it for you to decide to, like, had you had that in the back of your mind? Okay, I do have this 28-day, on my benefits. I can check into rehab at any point. Was that sort of looming over your head or in the back of your mind for that, that last stint of you drugging and drinking?
No, not really. It's only because I've worked in that sector in a previous career that I knew that they
Mm.
were in private medical policies. But it was a spur of the moment thing.
Mm.
I woke up on the 2nd of January. I said to them I wasn't going into work because I've been out all Christmas and all New Year's Eve as well. And I just rang them up and said, look, this is the position I'm in. I'm a bit fucked.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, come in. We'll give you an assessment. And then the 28 days started.
Yeah. So you had your 28 days, and this is when you were talking about when you went back, the corporate pressures and such got you back into it. Am I following the timeline here?
Yeah.
Okay. So then what happened coming out of that? So you went back into the corporate world, it got its claws back in you, so to speak. What launched you into the sobriety that we're seeing with you now and that we're talking about today?
Yeah, so since I've been to rehab, I've been sober. So
Gotcha.
I started working at a new finance firm for 4 months, just made my probation, otherwise I wouldn't have got my private medical. But again, that was luck rather than judgment. I just got to that point. I don't think it's a conscious decision over time that that's what you're going to do. I think when you're broken, physically, mentally, and spiritually, you just need to do what you need to do to get fixed. So 28 days in rehab was brilliant because that was the longest I've been clean for. A lot of group therapy, a lot of individual therapy. It was step-based. So the idea was you do step 1 and step 2 of the 12 steps. You then carry it on once the 28 days are over. So they're a bit of a feeder into that as a support network, which is brilliant, I think. But it just wasn't for me after a year. Like, I've realised without alcohol, I'm very much an introvert.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of embracing being an introvert. I only do things when I want to do them, and if it makes me feel uncomfortable, why am I doing it?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm 36 years old now. Like, I've had enough of doing things that I don't want to do. Yes, it can be healthy and make you go out your comfort zone, but really, do you need to do it? Possibly not. So I find with things now that it's a lot easier to say no.
Yeah, that's a big thing that I think a lot of people in sobriety learn, that no is a complete sentence, right? You don't have to say no and then this rambly excuse as to why, or have to say yes when it doesn't resonate with us to do. So that's important to say. Yeah, you mentioned it. I'm kind of curious, like, what do you use as a marker or a checkpoint internally for knowing that it's like, okay, this is getting on my comfort zone? Because certainly you do live life out of your comfort zone, like writing a book and publishing a book, you know what I mean? Just in 2 months and putting it out there, certainly that's out of your comfort zone for never having done it before. So what is your internal marker as far as going, oh, this is something I want to do? This is a 10 out of 10 for me. Like, how do you come up with that in your head?
Yeah, I think energy, without going in, because I don't understand chakras and all that, it's not quite that end of energy. But I realized when I was in the corporate world and I was sober for a year and a half, I was like, everything in my life, in theory, looks really good. Like, I was bankrupt a year and a half ago, but now I've got, to be honest, I had quite a bit of money back in the bank account again. So I was in a very privileged position, but I still wasn't happy. And it was the job. Like, at the end of the day, we're conditioned to almost stay in these jobs that we don't like. Family conditioning, like, I love mum and dad to bits and drag them through hell, but there is an element that their expectations were always part of why I felt like I was a bit trapped. And that might be because of what their parents did or whatever, but sort of unconditioning myself was probably the biggest part of understanding that the corporate world didn't suit me. I don't like being told what to do. I can take criticism, I can take feedback now. That's something I needed to work on, especially having a publishing business because I need to listen to feedback and any spelling mistakes, which hopefully I never make.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was just the pivotal point. Year and a half into sobriety, I went, you know what, life's too short. I'm going to take a risk. Tried setting up a golf travel business. So golf for me is my passion, always has been from a young age. Sobriety's allowed me to play it a lot more and a lot better, thankfully. But yeah, that was the turning point. I just thought, you know what, I'm wasting energy in this business. I'd rather put my passion and purpose into something that I want to do. And then that's naturally gone from doing the counselling, doing the strength and conditioning job as well that I've done in the past. And then it's just naturally progressed into publishing because I love the power of a good read. Like I love reading.
Mm-hmm.
I love listening to audibles. And I think they can be so powerful at such a relatively cheap cost. So I don't feel like I'm ripping anyone off charging $15 for a book. And yeah, I really do love books, and it's crazy. Not in a million years would I have thought that I would have got into publishing. But
Yeah.
that's the crazy thing with sobriety. You're saying whether I feel like I'm going out of my comfort zone. I think I like to try things, and because I'm sober, I've got so much more energy if it's channeled into the right things that I find interesting. At the end of the day, I think I know quite quickly, like the counselling side of things, because I've become much more of an empath. I was taking on too much of other people's problems, and I couldn't really get past that post doing our hour consultations, etc. So after about 8 months of doing it, I was like, you know what, I've been through all my own traumas.
Yeah.
I can't do this again. And that's when I naturally went into the physical side of things. So doing the personal training, and then went into strength and conditioning, which altogether, all the things that I've done provide a very holistic look at life. I mean, finances you need to be in good check, because if they're not, they cause an extra stress. The mental health side of things, it was really fascinating doing the learning. But like I said, I was too much of an empath, and I knew that gut feeling that I can really trust in sobriety as well guides me. Whereas before, when I was drinking and drugging, my gut feeling was normally irritable bowel syndrome or leaky gut and running off to the toilet with explosive diarrhea or something.
Yeah, a whole different. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, no, this is important too. I remember both the times that I'd sobered up, how drastically different my digestion was and my just relationship with it took a while, man, and like that's something, you know, that's so important. And yeah, so I really respect that you have that holistic approach and such. Yeah, and it just sounds like you mentioned, you try a few different things on and see how it works out for you. Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of what you do is you've experimented on yourself, and then it's just a matter of you're suggesting it to people from something that you've have experience in.
Yeah, and I think fear, I always had fear of failure, and that stopped me doing everything. That's why I was stuck in a corporate.
Yeah.
But that fear of failure, which my other half would probably say could do with the coming back a tiny bit, isn't there anymore. I think, you know what, life's too short. Life's too short. I've been through my experiences, which have taught me a lot, and I'm still learning. I'm always the student, never the master. The reason why I always listen to the Eckhart Tolle books is to keep me grounded. Like doing the publishing, you get a lot of people, which is it's not what I signed up to at the beginning, but actually it shows it's a good book, because people keep saying, "Oh, thank you very much for doing this book. Like, I really enjoyed it. It's I'm 7 months sober and my whole life's changed." And getting that all the time, my old self, my ego would have gone off and thought how brilliant I was. But at the end of the day, I'm here on a journey as much as everyone who reads the books. I read other people's books, which have inspired me to read the ones that I do. So yeah, it's just sobriety gives you all the time and energy, if channeled in the right way, to be whatever you want.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. How did you go about so you've alluded to it early in the conversation. go about marketing your book? Because you mentioned like to beat out This Naked Mind and various other ones and stay on #1 in Amazon. That's a massive accomplishment. And I've been in had a few different authors and would be authors on the show before, and just in my connections. I'm just kind of curious. So did you have a bit of a marketing background in some of the work that you were talking about before? Or was that something you had to learn, or like, yeah, how did that show up for you, and how were you able to get to that stage where you could, become literally a #1, #1 bestseller, which is amazing.
It's learning again. So all
Yeah.
the publishing courses I've done, I
Ah,
don't just do one, I do 4. So
gotcha.
my USP is that I will never stop learning. So for me, I always have an advantage over people because I genuinely enjoy all the technical aspects of building a website, doing
Oh,
blogs,
okay.
and putting it all together. So while other people are like, oh, I can't be bothered with all that, I generally don't mind it. But it all boils down to a few things. So you need to have a catchy book title. So Sober on a Drunk Planet was actually a friend of mine who we both run the Sober Golf Society over in the UK. And he had that as his Instagram handle. And I just said to him one day, look, I've been looking at book names for this book that I'm doing through this publishing program, and I really resonate with your Instagram handle. Can I take your name? And he was like, yeah, fine.
Wow.
And then, yeah, literally, yeah, it's gone really well. And it's the cover, but ultimately the book needs to be good. So it isn't just me writing, it's me writing. My other half is sober for 4 years sober. She's been to AA and various other things, and she reads it. She has to approve it. But then I've got editors as well who are sober.
Ah,
So it goes through a round of checks. And I'm very much of the mindset that if I'm doing this 100%. I'm not half-hearting a book. I want these to genuinely help people. So that's why my style is very much write it from a reflection point of view. There's a few bits of experience in there to try and help people relate, but beyond that, I think if I ever do a memoir, it will be after 40, because I just feel like sobriety has given me so much more energy, which sometimes I get it wrong. Like I was burnt out towards the end of the year.
mm,
Um, you see most authors, especially the ones with the bigger publishers, they'll probably do a book once a year, if that.
right, right.
And I've gone and done, by the time I've released the 3rd book, and I've released Sienna Green, who I also publish for now under the
Hmm.
Sober on a Drunk Planet.
Right.
I would have done about 7 books by the time all those books in the series are done in July. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so I think I still have an addictive nature, and sometimes I get the balance wrong, and I've
Yeah,
sort of the weather in the UK doesn't help in winter, but
sure.
go through bouts of depression, which are very short lived, because I spoke to Lindsay, my nutritionist, and said, look, we need to sort this out. And then I've just built up from the ground up again, getting all the things right. But yeah, it's a lot easier to deal with depression when you're not drinking or drugging.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is ebbs and flows of life. Life isn't always perfect. Sometimes you get things come along. They always say things come along in threes. We seem to have about 6 things come along at once last year.
Mm,
And you've just got to use the tools that you've learned um, to be able to overcome it. And to be honest, I'm almost rereading my own book, but 3 Sober Steps is very much the tools book. So all the stuff I did in counselling, all the stuff that I've learned when I've been counselled as well, all the physical stuff, nutrition as well, are all in that book. And insights from AA, because I think I still wouldn't be here if I hadn't done the 12-step program. I think the
right.
12-step program is incredibly powerful, but unfortunately AA isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
That's just the fact of life.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's I'm a similar, like AA saved my life. So I'll always have one foot in AA, and then my other foot is in a lot of the other things that you've been talking about. Like I started going to the gym every day and getting into yoga and breath work and all these other modalities. And it's sort of, that foundation of 5 or 6 different things, including AA as opposed to just AA, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for introverts as well, AA can be a bit overwhelming when, well, I can't speak for everyone. This is just for me, but going and talking about drinking drugs and the level of detail that they did, I almost am out of sight, out of mind. So I avoid the people, places, and things that remind me. And
Right.
part of the neuroplasticity of it all is that those neural pathways have pretty much decimated themselves. So I've created new neural pathways that are more positive and attached to other friends now around other things, mainly golf.
Yeah.
Mainly golf in the gym, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm hearing golf is a big one for you, which is amazing. That's so cool. So yeah, the 3 sober steps, you've mentioned them. What exactly are they? Can you reveal, or is that for folks to find out by listening or purchasing the book?
So to be honest, it's quite simple. So the reason I went for 3 sober steps is just to try and conceptualize everything, because it can be a bit too much trying to remember everything. But I think that the starting point for overcoming anything is education. So building that self-awareness is the first point. You have to build self-awareness in order to recover from addiction. You have to understand that what you're doing is not normal. You have to understand what addiction is. And by understanding, you can then give yourself the compassion that you need to recover, because you're I'm so hard on myself for years, thinking I'm shit, but I was addicted. I didn't realize addiction was a mental health problem. And until I went to rehab, I learned that actually it was an alcohol addiction. It wasn't a drug addiction. My addiction started possibly from food addiction when I was young, and then that manifested in alcohol, and then later on in life it was the drugs. So self-awareness, and then it's the obvious point. Like I remember as saying, probably Tony Robbins or a million people have all said it, but knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is potential power. So until you actually go and use what you learn, nothing's going to change. Like nothing changes if nothing changes is a great quote from AA and from other places as well. But it just nails it on the head. Like there's a level of, in the Facebook group, for example, sometimes people will be like, "Oh, I've tried this, I've tried that." I'm like, "You haven't really tried it. You haven't really tried that. You're just coming up with excuses." Excuses are very much, again, it's a bit of a life coaching term, but limiting beliefs are your excuses. I can't go to the gym today because what? You can go to the gym. And to be honest, I'm my own worst enemy at the minute, because I've had a trouble, considering I'm a strength and conditioning coach, trying to get back in the gym. And I'm finding every excuse under the sun. But I know one day I'll just get over my own bullshit and start going again. And then the final step is just building intuition. So between self-awareness, I call it positive action, because not all actions are equal. And doing that, you're building an intuition. You're understanding through learned experiences of being sober, whether it's right or wrong. You can start trusting your gut a lot more. And that intuition is something that we make a lot of bad decisions when we've got essentially a poison in our system, because the body's too busy repelling it and detoxicating it, and everything else that it needs to do in order for us to make healthier decisions. So a lot of 3 sober steps is basically trying to train people or give them the tools so they can hone in better intuition, so that they're making healthier decisions on repeat, rather than making the same mistakes of drinking, being hungover, regretting what they do, feeling depressed, and then starting that cycle again, which I was in for 20 years, all in all.
Yeah. I imagine like it's the next step from that with the intuition is what you're talking about, as far as doing things that actually serve you as well, right? So first off, it's breaking the cycle of the habit itself, and then using that exact same step, that 3rd step, to be able to do what you've been talking about, realizing with a clear head, okay, I am an introvert. I do have that desire to write a book, and being a little bit more like in your body and such, and following your intuition in that sense, where the body and mind connect. And this seems like a next natural step as far as like developing intuition, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, this was an intuitive decision to take a publishing course,
Sure.
because I already intuitively knew what I wanted. But then, I mean, I hats off to marketers who get me to buy their products, because I am a very skeptical person. I trust no one. So if
Right.
I'm parting with money, I know that their YouTube advert or whatever other advert it is one of the best, because they're nailing every emotional point that I'm looking at doing. So people say it all just works out, but all these things have been happening because of a number of steps I've taken throughout my sobriety.
Right.
So it was coming out of rehab, having those initial thoughts about, oh, wouldn't it be great to bring out my own Audible book one day? And then 3.5 years later, that manifests itself into then publishing a book within 2 months. And people look at me and say, you published a book within 2 months, but I sort of had the idea for the book. And it really didn't, again, people, other authors might hate me for saying this, but it wasn't difficult. Like, the difficult bit was making sure I read it through about 20,000 times before it went out, because I'm still a bit of a perfectionist, which I think you need for publishing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there was one mistake in the book, which only one person has mentioned, and that was last week. And it was, funny enough, I say in the book that I was one of the first worst financial advisors, but it was a maths number that I got completely wrong. I think it was about the calories about McDonald's in there.
Okay.
It should have been about 500,000 extra calories a year through drinking alcohol, but I think I put 50,000. But that's one
Wow.
mistake.
Yeah.
So I'd take that.
Yeah. That's interesting, eh? And then the one person points it out. You're like, damn it. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the third book that's coming out. We're going to be airing this episode in very close to May 8th, which is when this third book is coming out. Does it have a title or a working title at the time of recording at this point?
Yeah. So it's still Sober on a Drunk Planet, keeping with the theme, and it's the main subtitle is Gut Health and Nutrition, just to make it quite clear about what it is. But essentially, the book describes the journey of alcohol in the body, and it paints a picture of, do you really want to be poisoning yourself? I mean, basically, at the end of the day, that's what it is. But it goes a lot deeper into the sort of impact that has, the illnesses that it's commonly associated with. So I suffered with irritable bowel syndrome. I was bloated for the best part of 15 years. And until you actually have a diet where it's anti-inflammatory and your stomach is not gassed out, for example, you feel completely different. But until you've been on that journey of completely changing your diet, and sort of getting rid of the syndromes, as it were, you then feel a lot more confident, a lot happier. You're getting the right nutrients and stuff. So when you've been drinking alcohol for a long time, there's various nutrients that the body really does need to work efficiently, which impact everything from cognitive function, skin. So a lot of skin illnesses people won't recognize as being associated with gut problems. So everything really does stem from the gut. The book just goes in, describes the damage that alcohol does from the gut and then spreads throughout the rest of the body. And then it also will talk about what better gut health looks like. So giving 5 easy steps for people to follow, and just to help improve their gut health. So it's not designed to be a one-to-one thing where a nutritionist would go into depth, but it's there to give people that self-awareness that actually you can't just give up alcohol and then eat whatever you want. If you want better brain cognition, you want to be healthier, you're hormone imbalances as well, especially for females going through
Mm,
menopause and alcohol
sure.
uh,
Wow.
a very big subject.
Right,
Um,
right.
and that's a good thing working with Lindsay. Like Lindsay's a pro. Um, she really knows her stuff, and that's why she's my nutritionist. And it's just nice that we can work on this book together and just make sure that it really does help people at the end of the day, because I don't think there's anything out there at the moment about around gut health and nutrition at a sobriety level in terms of books.
Yeah, brilliant. You might have another, not, speaking to whatever ego you may have at this point, might be another number one bestseller for you, eh?
Well, the good thing is that I've built up an email list of people that are just interested in the books. So
Very cool.
from that point of view, all the hard work, and I burnt out towards the end of the year. I'm
Yeah,
only just about coming out of it. So all the hard work has paid off, and I just can
brilliant.
take it a bit easier,
Yeah.
but just enjoy it as long as um, at least this time I've got 3 editors, because I've got Lindsay and I've also got my other half, April. So at least I know if it makes it through us 3 and that we all like the book,
Yeah.
then there's a chance it will do all right.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. We'll wind things down here, Sean. I really appreciate you coming on and looking forward to, to especially that book. I've been very much interested in gut health and such. I have a few questions for you after we stop here today. So Sober on a Drunk Planet, that's your Instagram and Facebook community, your Instagram handle and Facebook community. Yeah, anything else? Any final words before we wrap things up today, Sean?
No, just really appreciate having me on. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.